Welcome to Mending Piece by Piece, a podcast dedicated to helping you mend piece by piece after experiencing loss. I'm your host, Linda Falasco, a therapist with over 30 years of experience specializing in loss and grief and a lifetime of lived experience. I will start by sharing my personal story of trauma, loss, and grief, and will also include honest interviews with others who have experienced loss and who have found strength and growth afterwards. So here we go, giving a voice to trauma, loss, and grief as we learn together to mend, even if it's piece by piece. Please note, this episode contains depictions of death and suicide. We understand that some may find these activating and/or disturbing. Please check the show notes for more detailed descriptions and additional resources. If you or someone you love is struggling with thoughts of suicide, please call the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988. I want to welcome you and thank you for listening to the first episode of Mending Piece by Piece podcast. I'm your host, Linda Falasco, and I'm a psychotherapist, speaker, author, and someone who has personally experienced trauma, loss, and grief. From a very early age, actually the age of 9, I always knew that I wanted to be someone that young people could talk to. I didn't know at the time what that really was, what it meant, but now I do. I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be a counselor, and I am. I've been in the field almost 30 years now, and because of the work that I do and my own personal experiences, I realize how important talking about not just emotions, but talking about grief, loss, and trauma, how important that is. It's so important for us to talk about this. Yet, in our society, most are still uncomfortable talking about loss and unsure how to deal with loss. And when you experience a loss and the world around you is so uncomfortable and just wants you to get over it or to get back to normal, that can cause you to feel even worse, to feel maybe alone and isolated. And you may not have been able to express your grief. There's many people I know and I've talked to that realized they weren't allowed to express it. They weren't allowed to talk about their loss. And they had to pretend like it just didn't happen or that they were okay and it didn't affect them. I've worked with young children or adults who were young children when they experienced loss and heard from many how the people around them, they didn't really acknowledge their loss. They didn't check on them to see how they were feeling and how they were doing. They just thought, you're just a kid. You're just a child. It doesn't bother you. You're resilient. Kids are resilient. And I realize how important, as a therapist now working with lots of people, that's not so. If they didn't get to grieve when they were younger, if they didn't get to feel those feelings or express them or know how to do it, it's going to come out at some point. And you might not be able to connect the dots and realize it has to do with this loss you experienced many years ago. We're in the year 2024, and grief, pain, and emotions are still taboo to some, and definitely uncomfortable for many. I know I grew up like this, and I was left to figure out what was normal, how emotions were okay, and I had to figure out how to cope with them. And when you're young and you're left to figure that out on your own, you don't always make the wisest or the healthiest choices and find the best ways to cope with them. I'm hoping this podcast will help others who may have experienced loss in the past and were never able to give a voice to it, were never able to express their feelings. Maybe you didn't even realize that you were experiencing loss and you did have grief and you have some unresolved grief. Maybe you're experiencing grief right now. Maybe you don't have this space to feel your loss, or you don't know how to feel your loss, or you don't even understand what's normal in grief, or nobody's acknowledging your loss. I'm hoping that this podcast will help you. I'm hoping that people will feel and gain a sense of community. You will find ways to cope. You will feel not alone, and realize, most importantly, that you can mend. You can mend after a loss. So, what is this podcast really about? A simple explanation could be just to say it's all things loss. Loss is something that affects everyone at some point in their lives. And loss occurs on many levels, from loss of a friendship, loss of a job, loss of a home, loss of a relationship, loss of childhood or identity, loss of a pet, and loss of a loved one. And in Mending Piece by Piece, we're going to explore all areas of loss and grief. So, what should you expect in this podcast? Well, this podcast will be a bi-weekly podcast that will be released every other Tuesday morning. And like I said, we're going to talk about all things loss. And I'm going to start off by sharing my story of the loss of my middle brother. But we will also have in this podcast interviews with professionals in the field, as well as other individuals who have experienced the loss. They'll get to share their stories and what has helped them cope and what has helped them move forward in their journey of grief. We will also have what we'll call Mending Moment episodes, and that is where I'll share from listeners what they've submitted, what's helped them in their grief and loss journey. So if you would like to be part of the Mending Moments episodes, you can connect with me on my social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or my website at Linda Falasco, LCSW. I'm hoping that this podcast will truly build a community by providing comfort, support, and guidance to all those who are feeling alone and unsure of how to move forward with loss. And here we go. We're going to give a voice to trauma and loss and grief. And hopefully we will learn to mend together. And we're going to start with me sharing a little bit about myself and my story. Like I said, I'm a therapist by profession and a lifelong mourner. Kind of funny because I found through family history that back in Ireland, on my dad's side of the family, my maiden name is Keenan. So the Keenans were professional whalers. Yes, you heard that right. They were whalers. That is, they wailed at funerals. Somehow I think that all connects to what I've been through, because Lord knows I can wail. I am the oldest of 3 children. I have 2 brothers younger than me, and we're from a blue-collar, middle-class family. And looking back now, I can see how so much of what I went through paved the way for who I am today and has influenced how I would feel, think, and react to things as they occurred. Definitely has influenced my relationships, how I cope. Like I said, it's influenced my career. My story may not be exceptionally different from others who have been through loss, grief, and trauma. But what's important to know is no 2 stories are the same because no 2 people are the same. So we all experience things uniquely. And even though I'm a therapist and I do this for a living, what I realized over the last few years is that my story and what I went through was traumatic, and it was filled with a lot of heartache. I went through a lot of trauma and a lot of loss, but it was just my story. It was just my life. So I just figured that's just the way it was. I never realized how much it really did impact me. Or I should say, I realized how much it impacted me, but I didn't realize that it was traumatic. And I want to share that story. I want to give a voice to it. And I want to let others know that there is hope in the midst of pain, that you can mend and you can grow. It's hard, but you can. I want people to know that they're not alone, that they're allowed to feel, that they matter, and most of all, their story matters. All the events that I went through added to the person who I am today and the person I am still becoming. I continue to grow and change. And when these events happened to me, I had a choice. I had a choice to either let the situations define me, tear me down, and destroy me, or I could learn to dig deep, face them, work through them, and grow from them. And I'm still growing. I'm happy to say that I was able to rise from the valleys and the pits that I was in, and I was able to get stronger with each trial. There were times that I was so broken and shattered in what felt like a million pieces. And I thought I would never be whole again. I thought that I would never be able to get up and put myself back together or even find joy in my life again. What I learned is with each trauma and loss, I was changed. The person I once was no longer there. I refer to it as there was a before Linda and an after Linda. I want you to know too that you are not the same person. If you experienced a traumatic event or a loss, you're different. People will want you to be the same person, or they're going to expect that same person, but you've been changed. And it's okay. You're not going to stay shattered. I didn't stay shattered. Sometimes, though, I think people wanted to keep me down because they could relate to me that way, maybe. They wanted me to be broken, but I didn't stay there. And I always said, and I still do say, people either love me or they like me or they totally hate me. It's one or the other. Very, very little in between. Most of the time, though, I think I was just misunderstood. Because on the outside, I may be laughing and, acting really confident or acting really tough. And, I might seem like I come off mean, like nothing was going on the inside. But it was just the opposite. I was lost. I was scared. I was hurting. Sadly, the people that were closest to me, who maybe should have or could have, shouldn't say it that way, but maybe I thought that they would have understood. They kind of left me alone to figure it out at a very young age, to figure some of this out. Even into my young adulthood, I was figuring out things that a lot of people don't have to do until they're maybe in their 40s or 50s. But I was expected to do these things. So instead of trying to understand, sit with me, support me, or just be there for me, they would just look at me like I was making problems if I spoke up or I wanted to even talk about my feelings or talk about difficulty, thought I should be over it, or they just thought I was a cold bitch at times. But I realized they just didn't understand. They didn't try to understand. They didn't see the hurt. They didn't see beyond the surface, maybe. I'm not sure. Instead, I felt like more was just put on me. And I was judged pretty harshly in what I did, even when I was encouraged to do some things or take care of things. If it wasn't up to par, then I was judged for it. And then when I set boundaries with people and would say no or would just try to step away, again, I was misunderstood. But maybe it was because I was trying to protect myself from being hurt anymore. Just didn't want that hurt anymore. So I needed to step away. So as I start to share my story and my experience with loss, I want to make sure that people understand that this is my perception of the way I experienced it. They're my feelings and my thoughts and how I reacted to it. It's basically my version of these losses that I've experienced. There's no right way or wrong way. It's just the way I grieved and the way that I saw it. And when I experienced loss when I was younger, I definitely looked at it differently. And as I moved through life stages and continued to mourn, I noticed I grieved differently and looked at things differently. And I will share that. But I'm going to start from the beginning. When I was 12 was when I experienced my first significant loss. I mean, before that, I had loss of pets and, I lost a grandparent, but I didn't know that well. But it was going into my 8th grade year, the summer of it, I lost one of my best friends in a car accident. So it was sudden, unexpected. And back then, 40 plus years ago, nobody talked about feelings. Nobody talked about loss or grief. It's not like it was today, or it is today, I should say, where, something happens in the community is going to gather together. They're going to have a memorial, a candlelight. They're going to go maybe to the site and put flowers. They're going to have people you can talk to. That wasn't the way it was. This was someone, like I said, was one of my best friends I played sports with, I went to school with. We went to church together. We were considered community kids, and we'd get in the van and they'd pick us up every Sunday and take us to Sunday school. Um, and we did other things together. People said we looked alike. We're Irish. We had light hair, freckles, but our names were, started with L both. And, people would confuse us a lot. Losing someone so young and so close was pretty scary because I didn't think about people could die and you could lose your friends at 12 years old. I think what was really hard at that time was that I didn't know what to expect. No one really talked, like I said. So you go to this funeral, I had no idea what to expect. Pretty sure my mom did tell me a little bit. So that did help. But what I didn't know was afterwards was that I was going to have all these feelings and I was going to be really sad and I was going to be really scared. And no one talked about it. No one followed up to see how you were doing or even told you, hey, this stuff's normal. Expect this. And no one told me about the nightmares. I had nightmares into my 30s about this. And that still, just thinking about it, I actually can visualize and picture what my friend looked like laying in that casket. And that's what I saw in every dream. And I can still see it to this day. I'm not as scared and fearful about it now, but as a kid I was. And I was pretty shook. So that was my introduction to loss and grief. And then fast forward to I was 25 and I was in graduate school. And again, it was this summer. So I was on break. And it's the day that changed me. I will never be the person I was before that day. July 18th, 1994. That's the day that I was told my brother attempted to take his life. I can remember I was outside we had a porch, and I was at a shelf that I bought to put precious moments on. I collected them, and I was staining it. And I had to go to the chiropractor. So it was sitting out there drying. And I came back from the chiropractor. And this part's a little bit of a blur, but I don't know if my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, if he was at the door or he was inside the house. I think he was at the door because I think I stopped to look at the shelf I was painting or staining. And he was like, I come in. And I was like, what's going on? Something's up. It was really weird. And my sister-in-law, his sister, was sitting on the couch and she looked like she had just seen a ghost. And he was like, I need you to sit. And I was like, no, I don't want to sit. He was like, no, I need you to sit. So I guess I sat. And he told me that my brother was in the hospital. He told me that my brother tried to hang himself the night before. And Yeah, he was on life support. Wow. Almost 30 years later, and I still can't get through this. Sorry. Yeah, he was on life support. That I should probably go and see him. That they were going to try to fly him to Miami. He lived in the Florida Keys with my parents. And it was a small hospital, so they wanted to try to get him to a bigger hospital. I don't know what came next. Somehow between Rob, my husband now, my boyfriend then, and my best girlfriend, Sherry, I think they were working their magic. They knew a lot of people that worked at the airport and for the airlines, and they got me what was a buddy pass them. And I do remember, though, when he sat down to tell me, I didn't realize it was my brother, Jeff. That was my middle brother. I thought it was my youngest brother, Michael, who was suffering from mental illness and was on drugs and alcohol at a very young age because he was very young at the time. He was 15, but I thought it was him. So then when I heard it was Jeff, I was absolutely even more shocked. And to rewind a little bit is that I had nightmares 3 nights in a row that something bad was going to happen to someone in my family. And the Friday, I think it was a Friday before it, I watched a show, Montel Williams, and they were talking about murder-suicide. Never knew anyone who did that at all. But I couldn't get out of my head that that could happen to me, that could happen to my family. And I was really upset by that show. And that's when the nightmare started. Someone was dying 3 nights in a row. So what did I say? I knew it, and I blamed myself. The blame started right there. I knew it. I should have done something. I don't know what I thought I could have done, but yeah, that was really hard. We hope you've been enjoying this incredible episode of Mending Piece by Piece podcast. We'll be back in just a minute after hearing from our incredible sponsor. Today's episode is made possible by a remarkable resource that understands the pain of losing a loved one and is here to guide you through the healing process. Introducing the Mending Piece by Piece workbook and journals. Mending Piece by Piece is not just a workbook and journal. It's a guide crafted to help you honor your grief journey without judgment or impatience. Both books contain educational information intended to help those who lost a loved one to better understand the complexities of loss and grief. The information is shared in a factual yet deeply empathetic manner, making Mending Piece by Piece an invaluable resource for anyone seeking healing and hope. You can find both editions, Mending Piece by Piece After Suicide Loss, Guided Grief Workbook and Journal to Heal the Survivor's Heart, and Mending Piece by Piece, a workbook and journal for navigating grief with hope, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Remember, your grief journey is unique and it deserves to be honored. Let Mending Piece by Piece be your guide as you navigate the complex process of grief and healing. Order your copy today and take the first step toward finding hope and healing. Mending Piece by Piece, healing through grief, one step at a time. So then I go from the airport and I'm flying by myself and I'm a mess. I don't know what to expect. Flying from Philly to Marathon, Florida, in the Florida Keys. Somewhere I switched planes. Don't remember that. Do remember calling my one girlfriend from a payphone to tell her what was going on. I know on the second flight going from maybe Miami, I don't know, to the Keys, somebody sat next to me. I don't really remember too much of it, but he sat next to me and I probably was crying. I was praying. And I must have told him what was going on. And the flight wasn't long. maybe like 30 minutes. But he was there with his family, I think. I remember a couple kids there, but he was sitting next to me. Small plane. And then when we got there, you walk right out of the plane and there you are, it's not like the big airport, so we walk right out to the parking lot almost. And nobody's there to pick me up yet. And this is before cell phones, so I can't call anyone and wait. And he says, "I'm gonna wait with you." And I just remember this guy being very comforting. And he was like, "I wanna make sure you're okay. I wanna make sure the person gets here." I don't remember all the details other than he was there and he was supportive and he just made me feel like, "Okay, you can get through whatever you're gonna face right now." So my dad pulls up and it's not too much. I wasn't waiting there too long, maybe 10 minutes. He pulls up and I say, "Here comes my dad." As quick as I say that, and then I get into the car and I went to say to my dad something about this guy, and I turn around, this guy's gone. And when I tell you it's like small, like you see everything. Like you see the parking lot, you see cars. There's only a few cars there. He was gone. Like, could not find him. Couldn't see him. He was not there. What that was, I don't know. But I didn't even see his family. And I just think back and I remember thinking, was this an angel? Like what? I don't know. To this day, I don't know. But I can tell you that he disappeared. Got in the car, I looked at my dad, and he was a mess. Like I've never seen. And he said, "He's gone. He's gone, Lindy. He's not here anymore." And I was like, "What?" Like, I thought he was going to Miami. I thought they were going to fix him. I don't know. He was gone. Apparently, the exact time my plane landed was when he passed. Exactly when I landed. And both my parents said, and they believe that he didn't want me to see him like that. So, I don't know. I held on to that. But we went back to the hospital because my mom was still there. And I walked into this room. Brother's still hooked up to these machines. And the room reeks like alcohol. Like reeked. It could make my stomach sick, reeked. And I thought, you gotta be kidding. My parents, they can't be drunk. They can't be like in this hospital handling it this way. And they weren't. My brother had drank so much that night that he did this, the night before on the 17th, that was all the alcohol coming out through his pores, through his sweat. But it was a smell like I've never smelled before. Like worse than being in like a bar with like alcohol poured all over. But my parents were broken. They were definitely they're not the same. They were broken. And for me, I remember going in and I didn't understand what's happening. And there was a tear coming out my brother's eye. And I was like, he's alive. He's crying. Someone needs to come. Somebody needs to do something. And a nurse came and had to tell me that happens after they pass, but he was gone. And then I decided, I guess, I had to take care of everything. My parents are broke. They don't know what to do. So here I am. And I've always been that way with my brothers. I've always felt like I had to take care of everything. And I definitely will talk about that in later episodes. But yeah, I went into gear, and I'm like, where's the pastor? Where's the priest? I didn't even know what I was talking about. I got to be honest. I remember seeing on TV or something, last rites. I don't even know what that meant. I was like, we need someone here. Like, someone got to do that. So they did. They called somebody in. I don't really remember it. Came, he prayed, he talked to us a little bit, I guess. But I had to make sure that happened because I knew that had to be done. And then it was time to, after I guess we said goodbye for a little bit, we cried. There was nothing more we could do. And I just remember just wanting to hold on. Just hold on and just stay there. But we couldn't. We had to go. We left that hospital. It was later in the night. It was just eerie. It was heavy. Felt cold. And I just remember getting in the car and just it was a quiet ride home. And I thought, what do I say? What do I do? I was already trying to figure out how I can not fix this. She ain't fixing this, but how am I going to step up? How am I going to take care of my parents? It's just one of those things. If you lost a sibling, you see how your parents are so broken. You see them crying and you just want to do something. You don't want them to hurt, so you try to put your hurt on hold. You try not to cry in front of them because you don't want them to cry. And I guess I just kind of started to go into that mode. Like, be strong, be tough. Hold them up. I don't know. We got back to the house and it was dark and I hadn't been there in a while because I didn't live there. I lived up north. And I remember being like, this will never be the same. Nothing's ever the same. And you're trying to figure out what do you do? Just felt like I was wandering. It wasn't even a big house. It was really kind of small. And then I didn't know, okay, what do we do right now? It's late. Do we call people? Are we supposed to sit and talk? I don't really remember what we did. I know we stayed up for a little bit. I don't think much. We didn't sleep much. And I could tell you I was afraid. Really afraid. It's strange going through it. I know now, and as a therapist, I ask people this, and I get looks sometimes. They're like, "What? How'd you know?" Because some people won't say it. But all of a sudden, I was afraid of ghosts because people, say, "Oh, they're always watching you," or "They're there, they're with you." You got to be careful saying that to little kids because they believe that, and the way they think, they don't realize that they're not really there staring at you. But in my head, here I'm 25, I was thinking that. And I don't know why I was afraid. It's my brother. He wasn't going to hurt me, but I was afraid. I was afraid to go to sleep. And at night, I remember sleeping up in the loft right outside my parents' room. And there was a teddy bear. My mom must have had these old, I guess our teddy bears as we were kids or something. And I had to sleep with one. I had to sleep with something pretty much for the rest of my life. I'm a little better now, but for the longest time, I had to sleep with a stuffed animal. I know that sounds probably childish, but I did. I'll own it. So I remember when I came home, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, that I had this little stuffed animal, little bear, and it had a little heart on it. And it was really, the heart was satin, and I liked how it felt. I slept with that bear and took that bear everywhere. I went away, that bear went with me. I could not sleep without it. And if I woke up and it wasn't touching me or I wasn't holding it, I would rip apart a bed looking for it. That bear went on my honeymoon. That bear was literally falling apart all over, arms, legs. The heart was falling apart. Someone took it for me. Well, they did it in front of me because I wouldn't have been able to sleep without it. And they sewed it up really nice for me. Eventually, I was able to graduate to other things like a really soft blanket, but I always have to have something now to touch. It's not as bad, but 4 years, that bear, or when he got really bad, because he did get really bad again, I had to substitute another bear. But yes, that's how that night ended. I attempted to fall asleep right outside my parents' room, but I didn't get much sleep. And I don't think my parents got much sleep either. Thank you for listening to Mending Piece by Piece podcast. If you lost a loved one to suicide and would like a grief resource to help you navigate through your grief journey, you could purchase Mending Piece by Piece After a Suicide Loss, Guided Grief Workbook and Journal to Heal the Survivor's Heart on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. See you in 2 weeks. And until next time, continue mending piece by piece, healing through grief, one step at a time.